Excuse me, Mr. Trump. So what you're saying is that the media is publishing all lies. Is that correct?
Question. Can you give us a question? Can you say categorically? You are fake news.
Well, that escalated quickly. Hot off the press. What's going on, friends? Logan Myerz here from Cinephellas.com to review Steven Spielberg's brand new film, The Post, starring Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep, alongside many, many great actors in this film. We have Alison Brie, we have Jesse Plemons, Sarah Paulson, Bob Odenkirk, Pat Healy, the list goes on and on. Really, really great cast. Post is based on historic events that happened back in the late 60s, early 70s, about the Pentagon Papers were leaked about the Vietnam War and what the presidents were hiding from the American people, lying to us, realizing that we cannot win the Vietnam War and sending, hundreds of thousands of innocent men to war and really having no chance of coming back alive. Meryl Streep plays Katharine Graham, the owner of the Washington Post newspaper. The newspaper was in her family her whole life. Her dad started the paper, and then her husband took over the newspaper after her father died. In this time, the women didn't run companies. They're at home taking care of the kids and making food. And this movie, Katharine is on the board with the rest of the men and, trying to figure out the future of the Washington Post and getting investors and making the right decision. Her assistants and things like that are all men and always kind of telling her what to do. And she's a woman, she doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't know the future of this newspaper, where in reality she does, because it's been in her family her entire life, and there's nothing else she knows better than keeping this paper moving in the right direction and putting out news that the American people can read. And we have Tom Hanks playing Ben. He works for the newspaper. He's under Katharine and, always talking to her as to what they're going to be putting out that week or that day in the newspaper. And they always kind of bump heads. In the beginning, they're bumping heads a lot about the future, what they should do, and what journalists they should bring on to make sure there's a larger audience instead of a local newspaper. And with the top secret confidential papers being brought in from the Vietnam War and the Washington Post trying to get their hands on it, and it's really this competition between the Washington Post and the New York Times. New York Times is always one step ahead. And the first act of the film is kind of a slow burn, especially with Meryl Streep's character. You didn't really see the performance that we know Meryl Streep can perform. And the first act is, her trying to decide the future of the Washington Post. And the film does really pick up with, finding these Pentagon Papers and trying to get that information out there. And then we have Nixon, who was president during this time, is controlling the media and telling them what not to post. And it's all bullshit, it's all fake news. Kind of like modern times. I won't say his name, but it's very relevant to 2018. And with Nixon basically suing the New York Times for publishing this information about the Vietnam War, everybody was scared. All these different newspapers, especially the Washington Post, there's some conflict doing what's right or, basically listening to Nixon and keeping their jobs. There's a lot at stake in this movie. And with the New York Times going down, the Washington Post is number one when it comes to news. And Ben and his group of colleagues, one being Bob Odenkirk, which was very, very excellent in this film, probably one of the best performances in the movie. His character was, very riveting and compelling. He had to go track down these documents about the Vietnam War, and he had to fly out and get this paperwork from Matthew Reese and bring it back to Washington so they can kind of look over it and try to think the next approach and the next step is to what they want to do with this information. With the Washington Post getting the Vietnam papers and going through it and seeing what has been done over the past, 10 years through, different presidents and what they've been lying about. And they're not telling the American people the truth. And, Ben is very strong-willed and he wants his voice to be heard in the Washington Post to post the real news, the real factual information to the American people, because, with the countless presidents, lying to us and realizing that, hey, we couldn't win this war, something has to be done. And with Katharine, we're going to all these parties with, government officials and people that work for the administration, friends she's been with her entire life. She doesn't want to get this information out there and really publish it because these are her friends, or so she thinks. So maybe her friends are actually using her to their advantage. And she slowly kind of realizes that throughout the second and third act. You know, with the conflict between Tom Hanks' character and Meryl Streep's character, they kind of form together and come together towards the end of the film to do what is right for the American people and to do their jobs. And that's to post and publish real news and the things that have been happening, you know, for the past 10, 15 years. And Meryl Streep really comes out of her shell. She becomes super fucking punk rock and wants to continue the legacy of the Washington Post for her father and her deceased husband, and not really care about her friends and doing what's right. And, you know, the last act of the film is really, really exciting. It's really riveting, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. You know, being a person that didn't grow up in this era, in the 60s and the 70s, and didn't really know much about history, I mean, the way that they put this in the film, the way that Steven Spielberg took this script and directed it and made this movie, it was just really excellent. You could see a lot of shots that he did with the ongoing, you know, you're in the newsroom and you see it pan out to a person giving their speech and panning over to somebody else writing for the newspaper. It was just really, really well done. In the final act, you see everything come together, you know, with all the conflict of what they can do, you know, trying to figure out, should we release a story? We have, you know, thousands of people's jobs on the line, you know, people with families. They're going to, you know, if Nixon takes over and sues the Washington Post, they're screwed. They're all out of jobs. Catherine's out of a company, and, you know, she has a family, grandkid. So there's a lot on the line here. And it takes Catherine some convincing, but she gets where she wants to be for the future of the company and doing what's right for the American people. So overall, I really love The Post, directed by Steven Spielberg, one of my favorite directors. Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, the list goes on of great actors and actresses that I love. It was really great to see them on camera together in this really controversial, you know, story back in, you know, late 60s, early 70s. And also seeing how the story changes from the first to the third act, and how these characters come together and doing what's right and standing up against the president and the administration and not being scared and doing what's right. That's the overall theme here, is the power of the press and the freedom of the press. And again, which is so relevant to these, you know, times today of 2018 with Trump trying to control the media, and it's all fake news, and fuck that. You know, it's all about the freedom of the press. And this really is a film that needed to be made. You know, I'm glad that Steven Spielberg picked this up after reading the script and realizing with the recent times of 2018 and everything we're going through, that this movie had to be made. And that's another reason why I think this movie deserves an Oscar. I really loved it. I'm going to give The Post a 4 out of 5 hair pieces. So what'd you guys think? Have you guys seen The Post? What's your favorite part? What'd you think about the overlying theme and story in this film? Were you alive when this all happened in history in the 60s and 70s? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe. This is Logan Myerz signing out from the newsroom. Somebody smoking a cigarette over there? Jeez. Until next time. Cheese!